Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. You ever ask yourself, hey, what's my sales DNA? Well, you know DNA. You've seen that shape. It's like a helix or a double helix. Well, I have a triple helix for you. He's right here. He's Walter Crosby, CEO and Grand Poobah of Helix Sales Development. Walter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
So tell us the Walter Crosby story. What were some professional adventures along the way that brought you to the work that you're doing today? And then let's talk about what that work really focuses on. But let's start with the backstory.
I think it's pretty typical of salespeople in one sense. I stumbled into sales. I was having lunch in New York at the Vanderbilt Club with a gentleman who was trying to help me figure out what I wanted to do. I'm out of college for 2 days. And he's like, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, I have no idea. I probably should have figured this out over the last 4 years. But so he kind of just looked at me with disgust, and because I didn't have a plan, and I'm, in New York City. I said, well, I'm really not sure I'm open to ideas. He said, what about sales? And I'm like, I don't know anything about sales other than that I've been a paper boy. I've sold everything. Every job I had was about sales. So that began the adventure. And then from there, I think the differences for me was that I invested in myself along the way. And I think that's something that a lot of salespeople don't do, or people in general. Like if we're spending money on something, we really should be investing in our own professional development. Even a book, right? As we were talking before, a book can help us with some ideas, but real training, real coaching, getting a mentor. Those are the things I found helped me advance my career over the years.
Yes, for sure. I'm curious, Walter, who were some of the early mentors and role models and sales experts that you resonated with back in the day?
Well, there were entrepreneurs. And I think that's why I've sort of had this affinity to entrepreneurs now, that business owner, because they had a passion for what they were doing. So one of the mentors I had he had a painting contracting business, right? And he painted high-end condos and apartments, and he had 3 companies. He had this cool little thing that he did that I didn't tell a lot of people about, but he could bid one job with 3 different quotes. Somehow he always
Nice.
But he did great work. And it was just those conversations with him about how he looked at sales and some honesty that sometimes he kind of danced around. He may be a little bit integrity challenged. But you start to see that the things that resonate with me and the things that I didn't want to emulate. And then I think from a sales perspective, I didn't really get into the Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglars, although I come from that era. I kind of migrated toward David Sandler. And I spent a lot of time in that space. 30 years ago, I spent my own money to become Sandler trained. And now I use a combination of a variety of different techniques, because you pick up things over the years from reading a book, listening to a mentor, talking to colleagues. I get together with people that do what I do on a regular basis, and we just swap stories and share ideas and best practices, because we compete, but we don't at the same time.
Right. This reminds me actually of, and we'll talk about your book here in a moment, but this reminds me of one of my least favorite compliments about my first book, the Do It Marketing book, that ultimately became my favorite compliment. Here's what the person said, Walter. Hey, David, I read your book. I like what you've done with the ideas. And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean you like what I've done with the ideas? I said, these are my ideas. These are my war stories. This is my perspective, my opinion, my experience, my expertise. And I'm just going off on this self-absorbed rant, right?
Sure.
And I thought about it and I was like, well, wait a second. I picked this up from Brian Tracy. I picked that up from Seth Godin. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants.
Sure.
And a friend of mine put it this way. He says, David, you shouldn't be upset about that compliment. That is a really, really, really high form of praise. I said, what are you talking about? He says, listen, there's only 6 good pages on leadership, and every other leadership program, book, and expert is a variation of those 6 pages. There's 6 good pages on sales, and every mentor, every author, every expert, every trainer is a variation of those 6 good pages on sales. He says, buddy, I hate to tell this to you. There's only 6 good pages on marketing. And if you were able to tap in to that body of expertise, that tribal knowledge, right? We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And you put that through your lens and your expertise and your battle scars and your war stories and what you think is right with the world and what you think is wrong with the world. And it comes out the other end as some original thinking about some topics that other way smarter people have thought about before you. And someone says, hey, I like what you've done with the ideas. That should be your favorite Amazon review and your favorite compliment. And it has become my favorite review and my favorite compliment.
It speaks to, because when you first said it, it's like, what's he trying to say? But he's really told you that you added value to something that had value.
Yes.
And that is a huge compliment, especially when we're talking about the people that you're talking about. I mean, that's a great compliment.
Right. Totally.
Printed on your house someplace in a big frame.
That particular review is not in a frame somewhere. It is on my Amazon page, though. So that's good. Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. So tell us about your adventures in publishing. I know that you have this fantastic book. Tell us about the book. Tell us about how that book came to be.
Well, I met a gentleman who presented a concept to me that he refers to. This is his IP, not mine. It's called a shook, a short, helpful book.
Yeah.
And what it really means is that I wasn't going to write a book that was going to be published on a New York Times bestseller list. That's not what I was trying to do. I literally was trying to develop a marketing piece to help somebody understand how I think about particular issues that CEOs and business owners struggle with. And so my goal was to cut to the chase, if you will, cut right to the point. Like, here's the problem. Here's what you're probably experiencing. And here's what you ask your team to do to help you fix it. And every CEO that I've shared this with has told me that, you didn't waste a lot of words. You didn't waste my time. And I am experiencing those problems. So that I accomplished my objective. And it's really not a book as much as a marketing tool, an asset.
The title of the book, Walter?
The 7 critical mistakes CEOs make with their sales organization.
Nice. Well, let's actually talk about some of those. I know that we've got some folks that are running, 10, 15, 20 person company. We have some entrepreneurs that might be running a very small company and they're like, you know what? Time to hire my first sales rep. Time to hire my first VP of sales to build a sales organization for the first time. What are some of those crazy mistakes?
I think there's 7 big ones, but they don't align their vision with what their employees are going to be able to do, how they execute it. So they tell them the story, they get the values out there, they share their purpose, and it's all very clear, it's concise, but they don't explain to that shipping clerk, to that salesperson, to that engineer or to that the person answering the phone how they can implement and execute on those beliefs and that purpose in their role with their level of authority. And so there's a disconnect there that's easily corrected if they just have that conversation with each one of their department heads and then let that filter down. So we need to give our employees clarity about what they can do. What latitude do they have? And it's not just about money. It should be about what they can do to foster that relationship with the customer, to help proliferate that value and solve a problem more quickly. Instead, I mean, how many times have we picked up a phone, called a business, and somebody acts like it's not their problem, that will transfer you to somebody else who can help it? But if that person can take some ownership and try to solve that, you've got a customer who's going to tell everybody, who's going to come back to you. So I think that's a big one that people miss.
Yeah.
Another one that I've spent a lot of time recently working on is hiring salespeople or sales managers. And we're different people, right? I'm a sales guy for 30 years. We're weird. We're different.
Yeah.
So the philosophy that I try to bring to CEO is that they need to be treated differently during the hiring process.
Yeah.
So if you're hiring your salespeople the same way you hire everyone else in the organization, you're going to miss the mark, because salespeople have to do things that nobody else has to do. Right? There's people out there that we have to call to try to persuade, to try to get them to understand. We have to get them to pick up the phone. We got to create some value out of nothing. Who else in the organization has to fight just to do their job? It just doesn't exist in the organization. So if we don't discern and qualify those candidates in a different fashion, then we're probably not going to get the ones we're looking for. But so I try to help with everything from defining the role of that salesperson. Each sales role is different. What I might call a salesperson might be different than what you call a salesperson or what you want them to do. Account management, business development, sales. What do we want them to do? Who do we want them to call? That's just a starting point. Like, let's get that right before we start to describe. We need to attract them with an ad that describes who we're looking for. I mean, just one little tip I share is that we should be telling everybody that we're looking to hire salespeople. Our vendors, our suppliers, our friends, our family, our employees, we should give them an incentive because it's a positive. It's a growth indicator. So if we know somebody or want somebody we know knows somebody and they know us, we increase our likelihood of having some success. We should run them through the same process, and we should be qualifying those folks just what we want a salesperson to do.
Yeah.
We want them to go out and talk to people and qualify them to see if they are the type of people that are a good fit for our company. We flip that around. And most business owners and hiring managers they'll sell the role, they'll sell the company right from the giddy up. And we shouldn't do that. We should wait till the end and sell the job and the role and the company to the right candidate.
Yeah, super, super powerful. If I'm not mistaken, Walter, you also have a suite of research-based assessment tools, correct? That you can help them with this hiring process, assessment process, and really screen out the wrong kind of person and just have them zero in on the right kind of candidates. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there are lots of assessments out there that are great. DISC, Predictive Index, Myers-Briggs. These are all great assessments that give us great information. But when they look at a salesperson, what they're doing is benchmarking. They're benchmarking what that individual will do in a social setting. So this person might be great at a cocktail party, at a dinner party, right? They might be able to hold a conversation and be engaging and have that spotlight be on them and be comfortable. But that doesn't mean that they're going to show up on Monday at the office and make some calls. Doesn't mean they're going to go have uncomfortable conversations and dig out budgets and decision criteria from our prospects. So I use a tool that is predictive and sales specific.
Yeah.
It only works for salespeople. And we look at 21 core competencies that are essential to our sales DNA and our grit. We also look at their competencies. But if somebody isn't committed to sales and doesn't have the desire to be successful, they're not going to be successful. And if they don't have the sales DNA, right, they have the need to be liked in their role. We all want to be liked because we're humans.
Yeah.
We're wired that way. But if we need our prospects to like us and love us, how are we going to ask them the right questions? How are we going to make them feel a little bit uncomfortable about asking them a tough question about something? So that's what gives us a 92% success rate in this process and saves us so much time.
I'm sure it's a scary number, the cost of a mishire, right? Especially in sales, let alone sales leadership. But do you help your clients kind of calculate as part of this process the cost of a mishire or their past mishires if they admit to some?
We have two different calculators on the website that are free for people to go check out. One is looking at the ghosts that we have, the ghosts of our previous salespeople.
Yes.
That's really costing us. But then to look at the hard costs of what it costs to bring somebody in and let them go in 30, 60, 90 days, or worse, hold on to them for a year when we knew 90 days in that they weren't going to be a fit. So the numbers vary. So we allow somebody to put their value of time, their cost structures, their comp plan in there. But in a very broad sense, you're looking at somewhere between 2.5 to 5 times their comp plan.
Wow.
So it can be significant.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Tell me a little bit about your sales philosophy, either from a sales training perspective or a sales management perspective. Probably the least favorite thing that most salespeople are faced with is prospecting. So why is prospecting such a big deal? Why is it a mystery? Why do people resist it? They'd much rather talk to a current customer. They'd much rather go play golf with somebody. Proactive, focused, intentional prospecting. What are your thoughts?
The reasons that people or salespeople or struggle with the idea of prospecting or outbound, like we changed the name to try to make people feel comfortable. It really comes down to how it's framed in our mind. It's like most other things in our world that we don't want to do. There's something that we're afraid of, something that makes us uncomfortable. So there's a couple of different ways, but I think the simplest is if you believe your product or service, and you're a salesperson, you believe that your product and service is helpful, that it will add value to your customers, then we should frame what we're doing as going out to talk to people to help them. Yes, we're talking people that may not know who we are, right? Because that's part of how we were wired up as kids, right? Don't go talk to strangers. Don't ask people a lot of questions. Don't talk about money. That's rude. And then we ask salespeople to go out and do all those things. So if we believe that if we can change that frame, that we're trying to help somebody and that we're going to just have a conversation where we're going to figure out if we can or not. And we might. And that's sort of the other part of your question is that we teach salespeople to ruthlessly disqualify our prospects. Because if we're going to get that no, when do we want to get that? After we've spent months with them or done a bunch of demos or proposals. So we want to figure out the reasons why somebody will or wouldn't do work with us.
Right.
And that's really another one of the mistakes CEOs make, is that it's their responsibility to tell the salesperson who those targets are and what the company's sales story is and to give them that messaging. That is something that a lot of CEOs just think, well, the sales guys are just going to go out and do their thing and they're going to pull it out of a black little bag of magic. And that's why a lot of salespeople fail, because they don't know what they don't know and they don't know how to go ask for it.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? So most CEOs, I think, especially as their company's early on in its development, most CEOs are the salesperson in chief. When it's time to expand that sales function, do you think that a lot of CEOs assume that the salesperson will approach sales the way that they did? And so delegation becomes abdication? Or where's that gap in what they should be doing and should be providing, assuming that, oh, I'm sure the sales guys and gals, they'll take care of that? How do we get more hands on in this transfer of power as we're starting to expand the sales function?
That's a great question and it's a big stumbling block for a lot of the entrepreneurs who sat in that sales seat, because they're able to do things as an entrepreneur, as a president, a CEO, founder, whatever the title. They have certain credibility that their salespeople won't, and they're at the top of the heap, so they can make decisions differently than how salespeople might feel that they can make decisions. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I think a couple of things that they should look for is getting out of the sales management seat, finding somebody, whether it be on a fractional basis or a full-time basis, that can come in and help set the systems and structures up so that they can manage the salespeople. But most importantly, sit with that CEO on a regular basis and sort of pull out everything that's in their head, all of those experiences, to get that messaging right, to get that story right. Why did they start the business? So that could be pulled out and that passion can be translated to the salespeople. And the CEOs are going to struggle with that. At least that's what I see often, especially the ones that come from a technical or engineering background, right? They think they can write it down or say it once to somebody and that salesperson should have it. And salespeople, we're a little more dense. We need more help. We need more time. And that's how marketing and sales really need to work hand in glove, right? That story has to be congruent. And we see a lot of CEOs struggle to get their marketing correct, right? This is something I'm sure you're fully aware of. They don't know how to talk to their audience. They don't put the right messaging there because they're talking about a technical thing or they're talking about something that doesn't resonate with their customer. So that's one of the things that we do is try to get them out of that management seat. They're always going to be around and they should be willing to come in and help close larger deals or participate, get a king to talk to a king or a queen to talk to a queen. But getting them out of that management seat, that's full of trials and tribulations for a CEO.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your philosophy of either target marketing or niching. So, for example, I think in your world, you work with a wide variety of companies, right? Service companies, product companies, retail, wholesale, manufacturing, distribution. How did you decide that, hey, I'm going to be, the entrepreneurial business owner, doesn't matter what vertical? And then is that a similar advice that you give to your clients, or does it really depend?
Another big question. So a few weeks back, you had Matthew Pollard on your show.
Yes.
So he's the king of niching down to like the smallest. Godin says the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They sort of kind of built on top of each other like someone else we know. But I think that's important to get the messaging right, to be able to build some traction with your customers. So if you have a widget, you're selling, something you manufacture or something you distribute, that messaging may be a little bit easier to put into a box. If you have a service or some sort of professional service, like sales development is essentially smoke and mirrors to a large degree, because somebody has to make a leap of faith to get an outcome.
Right.
And, advertising, marketing there's some smoke and mirrors in there too. It's a challenge. Now we have a process that we should be able to explain. We should have some philosophies and some steps that we go through on a consistent basis. But in sales, in a general sense, there's 5 big buckets, I think. Take messaging out of it and get the marketing part right. But you have salespeople and sales managers. You have systems and processes for the sales organization. So that's sort of the skeleton. how everything's going to work together. And then you have your sales leader, right? That comes with the larger organization. And then the one that's also forgotten a lot is the sales hiring. Those things all need to be working and pulling the wagon in the same direction. So if we have good salespeople with an awful sales manager, and there are a ton of them, because most of us were promoted to sales manager or sales director because we were a great salesperson. And somebody thought, well, hey, if you can sell, you probably can get these guys, pulled together and get them ship shape. And those are different skill sets.
Yes.
The first time I was asked to be a sales manager, I was excited. It happened at a Christmas party. And my wife told me afterwards, I told her about the conversation and the offer. And she's like, that's great. Congratulations. But have you ever managed anybody before? Because she knew that I could barely manage myself. And that's what happens. And if you don't step into that and go and try to figure it out, you just frustrate everybody, including yourself. And that CEO, that person they've promoted, now they've lost the revenue from the street. They frustrated their sales team. They frustrated that salesperson. They frustrated themselves. And often that sales manager goes and works for a competitor back in a sales role. And it's a losing proposition all around.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you mentioned about those 5 building blocks that clients need to get right. Let me ask you, as far as Helix sales development, what are the various investable opportunities of how you help your clients? I'm guessing they map to some of those things that we just talked about, but what's on the menu? How can people hire you and work with you, Walter?
There's really 2 places that I start. One is sales talent, and we figure out, how many they need to hire, what they need to hire, why they need to hire. And that's an entry point. And we have a process that we go through to teach them a repeatable process that they can go implement, document, and put into their system. The other place that we start is understanding their current sales team. So that's looking at all of those 5 buckets and being able to answer some basic questions as to, can our team get better? Does our team have the capacity? And what's that capacity look like? How long will that take? And most importantly, what will that require? And what's the ROI? So we have a way of coming through and doing that evaluation in a very efficient manner and very cost effective to really understand. So if somebody says, hey, I want some sales training, I'm not your guy, because I think sales training is something that we do last, which is opposite of a lot of folks in my space, because, it's a very profitable thing, to be perfectly honest. It adds value. But if we're training people that aren't trainable, that aren't going to be there in 3 weeks or 3 months, we've wasted money. So let's go figure out if we've got the pieces in place. Do they have accountability? Do they have a sales culture that's functioning to grow revenue and have that accountability? Do we have the right types of salespeople on the team? Do we have the right structure? Do we have a good sales process? Right. And then once we have that infrastructure in place, then you can come around and do the sales training. And how long does that take? Depends upon the sales organization, how good a shape it's in or how weak it is. But I think those are the 2 places that we start. I've had people say, hey, can you come in and do, 3 days of training? On what? Well, what do you mean? Like, what do you need training on? Like, what's working, what's not working? And they know they have a forecast problem. They know that they can't get a reliable and accurate forecast. They know that their pipeline is overstuffed and has too much hope in it, but they don't know how to fix that. I'm like, those are the kind of things that we need to correct before we go ahead and start training. So let's build that structure and then train the people with the systems in place. And if you do all of that right and you don't coach, if you don't have a sales manager in place that's coaching on those topics and coaching in the same language, it's all going to fall by the wayside.
And we're talking about ongoing, systematic, programmatic coaching, not just once in a while when you have time or when you think about it.
I mean, this statistic, most people raise their eyebrows, but A sales manager should be coaching 60% of their time. And if we take away all the stupid reports that they have to do and the redundancy of their job and them wanting to be a hero instead of coaching their salespeople, they have the time to do it. They
Yeah.
just don't know how, and they weren't experienced. So we have program that will come in and will work with a sales manager to make sure that they do know how to coach, that they do know how to create accountability in the organization without it feeling like micromanagement.
Yeah. Huge, huge. As we're landing the plane, I mean, everything that you just said, I think is super smart. And it's very, very different from the traditional quote unquote sales training company, including sales training comes last. Are there a couple other contrarian nuggets that you want to just drop on people as we're wrapping up the show here? Things that they might not have thought of, or self-soothing delusions that might be blocking their success?
Well, I did a blog post a couple of weeks ago. Most CEOs want to hire, they'll look at a resume and they'll see industry experience. We need this person. They understand our industry. They understand our customers. This is going to be great. We need to hire this person. Now, there might be 5 years of experience with 5 different companies or 3 different companies, which is a problem. But I would flip that. We need a correlation between who they called on. If we're selling payroll services to mid-sized companies, we would want somebody that maybe had some payroll experience. It's not wrong, but what would be more important is that who's making those decisions? The HR person, the CFO, the controller. Does this candidate have experience talking to those people? Do they know what's important to those stakeholders? And do they have a Rolodex, for lack of a better word? I know that dates me.
Sure.
Do they know those people? Do they have the business acumen? Right? That's a huge problem for salespeople today. Like if I'm interviewing somebody, one of the questions I ask is, how do your current customers make money? And often they look at me like, what do you mean? Like your customers are in the business, you're selling them a product. How do they make money on a quarterly, monthly, annual basis? And they have no idea. They've never dug in and asked those kinds of questions. And if you don't do that, you're going to be considered a supplier, right? Maybe a vendor. We really want to partner with our customers, really understand their problems. Takes a little bit of time. We got to build the trust and the credibility. But if we don't have the business acumen to understand, what margins are and where they need to be and how we can support that, we're never going to have a lasting relationship with our customers.
So powerful that just even that value bomb right there about moving from salesperson to growth partner. I mean, that's like, oh my gosh. Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. So let me ask you this, Walter, as we're wrapping up, if folks were to take one overarching concept from our entire conversation today that's been just so far-ranging, so valuable, so smart, what would you hope that one overarching takeaway would be that people should remember?
That they think differently about their sales team and their salespeople. They think about what they do differently. It's not just a regular job in their organization. We have to do some different things. And that we should think about that they don't have all of the tools. We shouldn't assume they have all of the tools to go do the job. We need help, right? We need help from marketing people. We need help from understanding that why that somebody's going to do business. We need help with some of those big questions that we should be able to ask and get answered. Because really sales is about helping people. It's about having a conversation with a little bit of empathy, a lot of curiosity, and some skepticism. And if we bring that as a salesperson to a sales conversation, you're going to get someplace quickly and you're going to add value.
Super, super important. Well, we're going to leave some resources in the show notes. You don't need to give the URLs because we're going to put all of that in the show notes directly under this episode. But I know you've got two fantastic resources for folks if they want to get connected and stay connected to more of your brilliance and what's cooking at Helix. Tell us about what those two things are that people can get right now.
Well, they can go grab the book. I gave you a link for them to do that. They can go to Amazon and grab the book if they want. But I have this thing I've been working on for a few months, and I'm really excited about it. It's a free 5-day challenge for CEOs and their hiring managers to come in, and I'll teach them exactly what they need to do to hire better sales talents. We call it hiring sales rock stars. And it starts with a mindset shift. We give them all the tools and templates that they're going to need to be able to do this, and help them understand if you do all of that right and you screw up the onboarding, you're still going to fail. So we talk about the onboarding in the 5th day. It's 1 hour a day for 5 days in a row, everything they need to get started. We're having some good feedback from the CEOs that they're getting it, that it's a shift in how they approach the process of hiring, and that it does need to be sales specific if they want to improve.
And it's live led, it's happening. It's a work session more so than like a data dump, correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's me talking about the process. It's live streamed. It goes out live to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and they can sign up for it for free. I've got a VIP section that we give a little extra Q&A at the end and some extra tools. But the goal is to just start getting people to realize there's a different and a better way of going about this. And if there's people that need a little help, I make a ridiculous, stupid offer at the end of it if they really want a little help.
Very nice. Nothing I like more than a ridiculous, stupid offer. So thank you. Walter, this was really, really valuable. People are going to need to re-listen, pull the car over, get off the treadmill, re-listen with notebook and pen in hand. Walter, Helix Sales Development is the website. We're going to have links right below this episode so people can grab a copy of the 7 Critical Mistakes book. We're going to have another link right below this episode so they can sign up for the next hiring free challenge, how to hire your next sales rock star and do it the right way. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
I appreciate it. It's a great format. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.